Let me be clear. The right wing and these so-called Trump border policies have nothing to do with keeping people safe. This is about ripping families apart, arresting immigrants, and blaming someone for our problems so we can ignore the fact that Trump and these right-wing officials are grifters and that Trump is taking millions of dollars from foreign governments to enrich himself. His main policy achievement had nothing to do with the border or migration, but cutting taxes for the rich and the biggest corporations in this country. All the while, the collateral damage is kids being separated from their moms, people in cages, which we can't deny. Mr. Holman sitting here before us said at the CPAC convention, and I quote, he doesn't give a about that. And desperate people living in the shadows,
that is
undocumented.
A lie. You just said something that wasn't true.
Mr. Chairman, would you please stop the witness from interrupting our members?
I'll ask you, Mr. Kerkorian, and I know you're a Project 2025 board member. Your recent quote from a few years ago where you said, quote, Haiti is so screwed up because it wasn't colonized long enough, end quote. Is that correct? Did you say that?
I'm happy to talk about that all you want.
You did say it, that's right?
I wrote it, yes.
You said that. Haiti was colonized as a slave plantation colony. The French colonized Haiti so that slaves would work on plantations. The end of colonization in Haiti was so that the people there would no longer be slaves. So what you're saying, and I read your quote, and anybody watching this online should go read it. What you're saying is it would have been good if they'd stayed colonized, which means that it would have been good if they had stayed enslaved by the French.
In the long run, it's one of the
in the long run,
history. No,
people shouldn't have been enslaved a single day. I'm reclaiming my time, Chairman.
And they had every right. They had every right to throw the.
What
French
you said
out.
is that you would have wanted them. Reclaiming my time. I'm talking now.
They would have been freed 30 years later, and they would have been in the same situation.
You're saying you wanted 30 more years of slavery in Haiti. Reclaiming my time.
I did not.
You just said it. Honestly, it adds up. You said that they would have benefited from the French influence.
In
the French were the ones.
Like the people in Martinique and
reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. I'd like my time back, please.
Enslaved.
My time. This is my time, Mr. Kerkorian.
They are much better off.
Honestly, this all starts to add up. This all starts to add up. You continue to do this, disseminate writings of white nationalists, try to rationalize, for example, Haiti being colonized for 30 more years. You're a Project 2025 board member. In Project 2025, I couldn't figure out why on page 583, it advocates for not allowing racial disparity or gender disparity to be considered discrimination legally anymore. In Project 2025, it eliminates a 50-year-old executive order that prohibits discrimination in federal jobs. On page 586, Project 2025 advocates for Donald Trump to allow businesses to discriminate based on religious beliefs. Before today, I couldn't understand why Trump's Project 2025 could advocate for ending civil rights protections. Why would Trump's Project 2025, I know there's crazy stuff in here, but I couldn't get why it would advocate for ending protections against discrimination. But now I understand. We have Project 2025 board members here who are the directors of groups that the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated as a hate group. We have people that are on the board that developed this who have said, for example, that Haitians would have been better off with more influence from their enslavers.
I like to deal in truth, and here's the truth about SNAP. SNAP was intended to give hardworking Americans a second chance during difficult stretches in life. It was never intended to become a lifestyle, but rather a life vest. And in spite of this, the program has shifted from its original intentions and has continually grown. It now represents some 82% of the Farm Bill and will cost $1.2 trillion over 10 years. The truth is, SNAP has been plagued by overpayments and errors. SNAP's national overpayment rate is 9.84%, leading to more than $34 million in erroneous payments each day. $13.15 billion a year. This isn't really even factoring in the overpayments of less than $48, which is not factored in. Look, this is all aided by sugary drinks, which are the second most purchased items sold through SNAP, accounting for 5% of dollars SNAP recipients spend on food, costing between $2 and $4 billion each year. The truth is, as the number of SNAP recipients has grown, our healthiness levels have fallen here in America. I think that's shameful. This shows a definite need for changes to SNAP, to ensure solvency in the program, to curb the waste, the fraud, the abuse, to incentivize healthier choices, and to rein in our skyrocketing national debt of almost $35 trillion.
My distinguished colleagues on the other side of the aisle have mentioned overpayment when they are talking about food stamps and SNAP benefits, when really we should be asking about overpayment to many of these corporate CEOs. When folks have been talking about waste, fraud, or abuse and are talking about people who are just trying to get by and on food stamps, I would actually point to the waste, fraud, and abuse of corporate America, who are overwhelmingly starting to dominate our food systems and jacking up prices on consumers while underpaying their workers. Just take a look at the beef market, where we have 4 packing companies that now control 85% of the market. Those same companies that have been caught with children working in dangerous facilities are constantly underpaying their workers and have used their market power to not only ignore those basic labor laws, but to jack up prices on consumers.
The Equal Representation Act, passed out of this committee and by the House earlier this year, is critical to ensuring fairness in our electoral process. This legislation adds a straightforward citizenship question to the decennial census questionnaire to ensure accurate information. It also ensures that only U.S. citizens are counted for apportionment of congressional seats and electoral college votes. American citizens' federal representation should be determined by American citizens only. We must get this bill passed by Congress and signed into law.
I couldn't disagree more with this really kind of wild Republican idea of the so-called, quote-unquote, Equal Representation Act, which would only count certain people in this country in complete violation of the 14th Amendment, again, a post-Civil War amendment. I don't know anybody here that wants to go back to sort of pre-Civil War times or a pre-Civil War Constitution. My office, just like every office here, when somebody calls, you don't ask, hey, are you a citizen? You ask, are you a constituent? How can I help you? We need every single person counted. And in fact, if there is a citizenship question on the census, we then would be admitting that we want to undercount people, because all the data points to the idea that this undercounts people. And the point of the census is to follow the Constitution and count the number of people. It's not to figure out who's a citizen or a non-citizen. It's to find out by the Constitution how many people live in each state. Donald Trump ran the kind of the oldest trick in the right-wing playbook. He said that everybody's problems are caused by a vulnerable group of people that he blamed over and over and over again. But these members, in their campaigns, stuck to their progressive values and also spoke directly to working people to build an electoral majority. They said, it's not immigrants that are driving up housing prices, it's Wall Street. It's not trans people that are causing your worsening health care, it's Big Pharma. These are the members that are authentic, that are proud, that are from their communities, that have promised to deliver to their communities and are unafraid of standing up to the real powers that be. And that's the core of who the Democratic Party is. And everybody knows here, I know everybody covering this is talking about the Democratic Party's soul searching in this moment. And we should be doing that soul searching. And you find that soul in these new members of Congress. In these new members of Congress. If we were more like the people that were calling for change, that are telling the Democratic Party they want us to be champions for everyday people, for working people, and for civil rights, then that's how I think we build the lasting majority and the big tent that we need to be able to deliver health care as a human right, to be able to drive down housing costs, to make sure that people don't get screwed over at work and price gouged at the grocery store. If we want to build that kind of a majority, then we should listen to these new members of Congress. Everybody in America and members of the press should hear how these new members of Congress are unafraid to get back to the core vision of what the Democratic Party is all about. They are the arsonists, but then they blame the firefighters for the flames, time after time after time. And the question for the Democratic Party is, what do you do in response to it? Because that's not going to change, and that's only going to get worse under the Trump administration. And the Democratic Party's response, I think, has to very clearly be for working people as the core of who it is that we are. For working and working class people and poor people and for everyday people. We should not abandon being the party of civil rights. We should be standing up for the rights of every single person, as Representative elect McBride just laid out. But that's what people need to hear from us first. So I think our job is to make it really clear who we stand up for, and that we're willing to stand up against the powers that be for those everyday people. And that's what these new members have been able to do so effectively in their campaigns. And I think that's what the future of a majoritarian, progressive, principled, and popular Democratic Party can be. Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, received a staggering $2 billion from Saudi Arabia for his brand new private equity firm. And while Hunter Biden never had any say over U.S. policy, Mr. Kushner got this $2 billion 6 months after working in the White House as a senior advisor on Middle East policy. Mr. Kushner had no experience in private equity. In fact, he was so inexperienced that Saudi officials tried to block the transfer of the money until the Crown Prince overruled them. While working at the White House, Mr. Kushner pushed through a $110 billion weapons sale for Saudi Arabia. I'm finishing my point and then I'm happy to talk about it. He then defended the deal in the wake of the Saudi government's murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And while this may all just be a coincidence, there's many questions. Like, was any of this money passed along to Trump? Was the Saudi money a thank you for a job well done in the White House? Was Jared given this money in exchange for anything else? Or did someone with no experience just have a lucky payday? These are questions we should have answers to. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Homan, you began as the Trump ICE acting director at the end of January of 2017. Is that correct? I think the date is January 30th, 2017. Does that sound more or less right?
Yes.
And you recall on your first month on the job, Operation Crosscheck, which was a large-scale immigration enforcement action across multiple cities. Do you recall that?
Not specifically, but we did a lot of operations like that.
It was a very significant operation targeting communities in multiple states starting on February 6th, 2017. The ICE officials at the time said this was about going after, and I quote, criminal aliens and making us less safe. But they said that this was about making us more safe. But in my community of Austin, Texas, the majority of people arrested and separated from their families had no criminal conviction at all. Do you recall this?
I don't specifically recall that, but there's no prerequisite in immigration law that says you
I understand, but
you are to be arrested for being in the country illegally.
I understand that. Your ICE spokeswoman at the time said that, quote, the purpose of the operation was removing from the streets criminal aliens and other threats to the public. But then a majority of people arrested had no criminal conviction. Does that square up for you?
I don't recall that. I find that.
I have another question for you, sir. Are you aware that your chief of staff, when they were asked this question, wrote emails asking agents to come up with, quote, top 3 egregious cases in order to deflect criticism? And if there weren't 3 egregious cases, go include a case from a different city. Are you aware of that?
No, I'm not.
So you're not aware of what your chief of staff was writing?
I don't know every email he writes. No, I don't.
There was an email directly to you from DHS Secretary Kelly asking for this issue to be addressed. Then, in my city of Austin, Texas, ICE officials were told they failed at this task because the egregious case that they wrote up was from before the time of the operation. Do you recall that?
I recall when I was ICE director, we arrested thousands of criminal aliens.
You're not answering my question.
Case?
Reclaiming my
time.
Reclaiming my time. Do you recall that when you were asked whether this had to do with public safety, that then Agent LaRon Bryant said to federal judge Andrew Austin that the reason for these ICE operations was not related to a safety protocol, but instead was a result of the Travis County, where Austin is, new policy that would target criminal enforcement on immigrants rather than deporting non-criminal immigrants. Do you recall this?
No.
So you don't remember that Agent LaRon Bryant said under oath that under you, in your first month as director, that there was a targeted operation at a city because of a policy choice from a local elected official. You don't recall that?
I had 20,000 people under me. I don't recall every
You don't recall this from your
said.
first month.
No,
I understand. While legal pathways to migration remain closed and are getting even more closed, folks here saying they care about sexual assaults by cartels, give me a break. The Republican policies of trying to close legal pathways towards migration is the best blessing that cartels could have ever asked for. By making it harder for people to apply for parole, by making it harder for people to seek asylum, Republican policies are exactly what the cartels would like. Y'all are making the cartels money. Y'all are making the cartels money by trying to slash addiction services, by trying to slash helping people with mental health. Then, yeah, you're helping the cartels. If I was a cartel leader, I would be picking the Republican policies being proposed in H.R. 2 every day of the week. You have people like Governor Abbott saying he would shoot migrants coming across the border if he wouldn't get prosecuted for murder for it. You've got Trump saying immigrants are going to poison the blood of our country. Don't come here and say that you actually care about the safety of those immigrants. If you cared, then we would update our immigration laws for the first time since basically I was born, so that people could apply safely and wouldn't have to go to a cartel and wouldn't have to go to a criminal organization. Immigration is a good thing. Immigrants are less likely to commit crime, more likely to start small businesses, help us economically. Sure, the food and the parties are much better with us here, but in our system, we have to open up legal pathways. And let's not say that this is about safety, because every step of the way, your agency lied and said it was about safety while you were separating kids.
Someone's time has expired. To the witnesses, if someone says something that hurts your feelings, just leave it there and don't interrupt the members. Respect their time. The chair now, I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Mr. Holman, we've heard discussion about using technology to secure the border, but technology really doesn't secure the border. It allows you to see who's coming to the border. And if you've got agents tied up processing people crossing illegally, it really doesn't do anything in terms of interdiction. Is that correct?
Could I respond to the earlier remarks, sir? That was saying I did something that wasn't said at all? I think it's important we set the record straight here. I never said at the CPAC I didn't care about family separation. What I said was I didn't care about...
Mr. Chairman, was he recognized for this purpose? Is this from your time?
The chair recognizes you make it as brief as you possibly can, and I think you've already said you didn't say that.
I've never said I didn't care about family
Okay,
separation. What I
that's
said I didn't
sufficient.
care about being sued because I get to give a sworn statement to set the record straight.
Okay. I want to get back to some things here. When you
Mr.
have
Chairman, I'd
people-
like to enter into record this article from Newsweek.
Mr.
Trump's
the
ICE
gentleman's
director
not
doesn't care
recognized. The
about
gentleman's
families
not-
being separated at the border. Thank you.
Reclaiming my time.
Mr. Chairman, is it in order now for me to enter things into the record?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I was trying to enter into the record is the article from Newsweek saying Trump's ICE director doesn't care about families separated at the border. Mr. Homan, the correct quote is, "I'm sick and tired of hearing about family separation. I'm still being sued over that. I don't give a right." I'd also like to enter into the record this article saying internal emails show ICE agents struggling to substantiate Trump's lies about immigrants.
So ordered without objection.
Today, we're discussing a Republican farm bill proposal that, in my view, not only fails small farmers and ranchers, but fails American workers. In fact, in today's 954-page draft bill, the word worker is only mentioned 6 times. And in none of those instances are they talking about the rights or well-being of the people who harvest, process, or pack our food for far too little pay. In stark contrast, the word corporation appears at least 99 times. And it's because it's largely those corporations who will reap the benefits of this partisan farm bill. In my view, the farm bill is such an important opportunity to reduce the power of those corporate price gougers. But instead, this Republican bill before us rewards them. The people who work to pick tomatoes in the summer heat, or who process food at the plant, or make sure that that food gets to our grocery shelves, they're the ones who should be getting more help in this bill. But instead, they are hurt by it because the bill cuts $30 billion from the nutrition programs that help those working families put food on the table after a long day at work. So who does this bill protect if it's not those workers? It is those big corporations, sometimes in a very creative way, that are getting more protection in this bill. Look no further than the provisions in here that provide liability shields for chemical corporations and their pesticides that make workers and consumers sick. It even throws a punch at the public servants that administer SNAP benefits by pushing for more privatization of their public jobs and shipping those jobs out to more corporations.
I mean, come on, y'all. I came to this committee to vote for a pro-farmer, pro-rancher, and pro-worker farm bill, not for a corporate handout. I yield my time back to Mr. McGovern if he'll take it.
Mr. McGovern's recognized.
Thank you. We just heard from a Republican member that somehow there's a link between SNAP and bad health outcomes. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, quite frankly. Studies that track the effect of SNAP on the physical health of recipients find that participation in the program is linked with improved nutritional outcomes, lower health care costs, and improved current and long-term health. The fact of the matter is food insecurity, on the other hand, is associated with extremely negative mental and physical health outcomes. So these arguments are unfounded, and they do real damage to the public perception of people who depend on SNAP and who, studies show, have similar purchasing patterns to non-SNAP participants. I would add one other thing. The gentleman implies that somehow people on SNAP are not working. The majority of people on SNAP who are able to work actually work. They actually work. But they earn so little, they still need to depend on SNAP to put food on the table. I mean, we live in the richest country in the history of the world, and there are 44 million Americans who are food insecure. And we have an opportunity to do something about it in this committee, and instead we're going in the wrong direction. Cutting SNAP by $30 billion will not result in improved health outcomes. It will result in worse health outcomes, more food insecurity, more illness, more avoidable health care costs. And we ought to stop demonizing people on the benefit. I mean, and the gentleman, Mr. Scott, showed us a chart about how much we're spending on SNAP. We're spending money on SNAP because we have a poverty problem in this country. We have had for a long time. And what's the option? To cut the program and increase hunger in this country? I mean, give me a break. We can fix this, and we're going in the wrong direction. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman. While we clearly disagree on the merits of this meritless investigation, I hope, Chairman, that we can at least come to an agreement on some basics. I believe that you and I can agree that presidents and White House officials should not be unduly influenced by foreign powers. So, Chairman, I'd be happy to yield to you briefly for a yes or no. Can we all agree that White House officials should not be bribed or unduly influenced by foreign actors?
It's your time. You can ask. We have witnesses here.
I would assume that you would agree.
We have witnesses. If you want to ask the witnesses question, or you want to waste time with me,
I'm not wasting time with you. I think that we've been disagreeing all day. I hope we can come to an agreement that White House officials should not be bribed or unduly influenced by foreign powers. I think you and I agree on this point. I see you nodding your head. I assume that that is a yes. I'm glad that we can work as an oversight committee on investigations, do the work we need to do, and make sure that no one in the White House has betrayed the public trust. We've spent countless hours talking about Hunter Biden, investigating every single person it seems like he's ever shaken hands with. We've not found a shred of evidence that connects it to the President of the United States or anyone with any say over U.S. policy. But someone who has worked in the White House did accept money from a foreign power. Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, received a staggering $2 billion from Saudi Arabia for his brand new private equity firm. These are questions we should have answers to.
Would the gentleman yield for a
Questions
second?
that the Oversight Committee should look into.
But we can just add another question. What was the role that Jared Kushner played in covering up the assassination and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, ordered by the Royal Conference?
Ranking member. And so I want to know, if Hunter Biden had accepted $2 billion from the Saudi government, I'm sure we'd be looking into that today. And, Mr. Chairman, I believe we can agree that there should not be undue influence in the White House, and I believe we should be able to agree that we should look into these questions about Mr. Kushner. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, you were on CNN and said, quote, I've been very vocal that I think what Kushner did crossed the line of ethics. And then in our deposition of Hunter Biden the other day, when we were discussing Mr. Kushner, you said, Mr. Chairman, and I quote from the deposition, when we deal with influence peddling, we'll ask about Jared Kushner. Well, today's hearing is titled Influence Peddling. So we are here. So, Mr. Comer, I would love to hear from you. Can we fulfill our responsibility as an oversight committee and determine if Saudi Arabia bribed or unduly influenced Jared Kushner or other White House officials? Is that something we'd be willing to look into?
We've already had a conversation with Ms. Porter. I'm going to answer one time. Ms. Porter and I have pledged to work on influence peddling legislation. We'll take up all the people who have been accused of influence peddling. We'll try to determine whether Jared Kushner has a real business. We haven't been able to find a real business that the Bidens have had yet. Now, just still your time, Mr. Clark.
So could we expect to subpoena Mr. Kushner's correspondence with the Saudi government or his firm's financial records or financial transactions between Mr. Kushner and his father-in-law? Is that something that we would consider doing as part of that hearing you just discussed?
What was the question?
If we are serious about looking into foreign money, I saw recently a poster board here about $100,000 to a car dealership. Are we going to be serious about the $2 billion from the Saudi government to Mr. Kushner? My question is, would we be at least subpoenaing Jared's correspondence with the Saudi government and his firm's financial records? Can we commit to doing that?
I think it's important to see if there were real legitimate businesses.
And if there was influence
let me
peddling?
ask you a question. What business was Hunter Biden in?
We heard explicitly from Mr. Biden. We heard explicitly from Mr. Biden about his extensive business record and his experience on boards. We heard about that.
Time's
Mr.
expired.
Kushner, on the other hand.
Chair now recognizes
$2 billion.
Mr. Fallon for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Santos, are illegal immigrants counted in the U.S. Census?
Yes.
Why?
They have a usual residence in the United States.
Okay. Is that data collected by the census used to decide how many congressional districts and electoral college votes a state gets?
It is.
And it's true that states with high numbers of illegal immigrants, like California or New York, are typically Democrat states?
Correct, as is Texas.
Yes, sir. By counting illegal immigrants, these states receive more electoral votes and seats in Congress. Doesn't that mean that Democrats benefit from illegal immigration? You're a scientist.
I am a scientist. That's the way the math works out.
Yes, sir. Okay. Do you believe illegal immigrants should be counted in the census?
I believe we should count according to the Constitution, yes.
Do you think generational Americans are negatively impacted by counting illegal immigrants in the census?
I have no comment on
Can you explain which states had overcounts and which states had undercounts in the 2020 decennial census?
Certainly. Would you like me to read the list?
Yes.
Thank you. In terms of, let's see, undercounts, there was Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Florida, Illinois, Texas. Overcounts were Ohio, Massachusetts, Utah, New York, Minnesota, Rhode Island, Delaware, and Hawaii, according to the post-enumeration survey.
Why do you believe that was the case?
The post-enumeration survey does not tell us why, it tells us how much.
Thank you, Chairman. And to the point that my distinguished colleague from Tennessee just made, the most immigrant states by far in the country with most immigrants, documented and undocumented, are California and Texas. Virtually no other state comes close, California being, of course, under unified Democratic control, Texas statewide under unified Republican control. The next state that comes somewhat close, but not really, is Florida, of course, also under unified Republican control. The question of whether to count immigrants, including undocumented immigrants, was decided by the United States Congress back right after the Civil War. So this was decided, it was debated in these same halls, and that Congress and the states decided to end the 3/5 compromise, which is when enslaved people were counted as 3/5 of a person when we did counting of people. Now that seems like the worst way to do it. And so they said, let's count every person as one person. And the Congress decided to do that. Not just with all due respect, just to my colleague who spoke before me, but to everyone in the Congress. I still don't get why we would rehash and rehab that debate after the Civil War. I think after that amount of bloodshed, that amount of terror and horror, we would look back at the congressional record and say, yeah, it probably makes sense that we say we're going to stop counting half people and 3/5 people and say we're going to count the number of people in the country, whether they vote or don't vote, whether they're citizens or not citizens, whether they're kids or seniors. We're just going to count every person as one person. Mr. Santos, isn't it correct that the census plays a role in counting the number of people for electoral purposes, but then also counts the number of people to determine how many federal dollars go into a state?
That is correct.
And so if a state has a falsely low census count, that could result in those states getting fewer federal resources for things like food for the hungry, hospitals, education.
Correct.
And so a state like Texas, having had an undercount, could result in fewer dollars coming to my state for people that pay their taxes and might need those dollars.
Correct.
And so if we ask a citizenship question, when the Constitution says that we need to count the number of people, not the number of citizens, then it could result in my state that was already undercounted getting further undercounted, and could result in places like Texas getting fewer federal resources.
Correct.
What I don't get is in the federal government's nearly $1 trillion in assistance. So all of the people that work in this country, they send their hard-earned tax dollars here. Then we send back about $1 trillion back to the states. I don't understand why my Republican colleagues would want states like Texas to get less help because of adding an unnecessary question. What I think I hear is some sort of conspiracy theory that Democrats want there to be more immigrants so that we can have better shots in elections, which is just nuts. And frankly, the people who have immigrated to this country and then decide to become citizens and are given a chance to become citizens, they actually listen to their leaders, just like any other voter, and they decide how to vote. There are plenty of people in my district that vote for me or vote against me who were born in this country and who weren't born in this country. And I think that at the end of the day, it's so important for the American people to understand and hear that this idea of a citizenship question would undercount people, would result in fewer federal resources come into places like Texas. So Texans on the Republican side that are for this bill are just basically saying, send your taxpayer dollars elsewhere. And third, it would take us back to a pre-Civil War reality, and that's just a shameful thing for the Republicans. Thank you. I yield back. Good morning. Mr. Kerkorian, you're an advisory board member for Project 2025, correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Kerkorian, in addition to being a Project 2025 board member, you also run the Center for Immigration Studies. You've done that for decades, where you spread and disseminated writings of people like Kevin McDonald, John Friend, and Jared Taylor, correct?
We used to have an email service that distributed links to
those
op-ed.
to their writings. That's right.
And the New York Times and all kinds of other.
Correct. And you, so
the board.
yes, I know that you're aware that you spread the writings of these three along with others, but these three are egregious examples. McDonald is the editor of a white nationalist journal. Your organization, as you said, disseminated his writings. He blamed Jewish people for the deaths of millions of people in the 20th century. John Friend, who you just said you disseminated his writings, is an infamous Holocaust denier. You spread his writings. Jared Taylor stated, quote, and I quote, this horrible quote, that when black people are left on their own, civilization disappears, end quote. That's what he said. You, a Project 2025,
we distributed only.
You only distributed, correct, I understand. I'm
immigration
reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman. Correct, you only disseminated writings from multiple white nationalists. Reclaiming my time, I'm going to ask you a question, sir. I'm going to ask you the next
wrote
question.
about immigration.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like that time back. So you, a Project 2025 board member, you're stating you did not disseminate, for example, Mr. Taylor, Mr. McDonald, or Mr. Friend's specific quotes here, but you just continuously disseminated these white nationalists' writing. One time is a problem. When you do it over and over and over again, it's a pattern. Now, with my time remaining, which I believe should be added, Mr. Chairman, because I was interrupted and I reclaimed that time, I have questions for Ms. Gunasekara. You served as chief of staff at the EPA in the Trump administration, correct?
Yes.
And you've worked with the Trump and his administration to implement your ideas in the past, correct?
Yes.
You authored Chapter 13 of Project 2025, correct?
Yes.
So you would support the ideas in Chapter 13 being implemented by the government?
I believe they are very good ideas for the next EPA.
Yes, you would support those?
Yeah.
So if Trump was president and he reached out to you and said he wanted to implement your chapter of Project 2025, would you support him in implementing that chapter? Would you say yes?
Time's expired, but you can answer that. I give you 15 seconds.
Yeah, I don't.
No, they interrupted me for.
Well, I'm the chairman of the committee. I decide. I gave you 15
I'd
seconds.
like to appeal that ruling, Mr. Chairman.
Look, You got your time, with the witness, feel free to answer the question, and then I'm going to recognize Mr. Fry.
Yeah, I don't believe he would call me and ask to do that.
Right, but if he did, you would want him to implement, you do want him to implement you.
Again, I don't believe that he would call and ask me to do that.
I understand. Do you
Right,
want it? Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to appeal the ruling. I'd like to appeal the ruling, Madam Chair.
No. Chair now recognizes.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Isn't it
Carolina,
within the rules for me
Fry.
to appeal the ruling of the chair and ask for a vote?
It's not an appealable rule. I gave you extra time. The ranking member went a minute over. I gave the ranking member 6.5 minutes. He took 7.5 minutes.
I was interrupted.
I think you guys are doing okay, Mr. Chairman. All right, we'll let it rest with that, and you'll see what happens in the next Congress, because we're going to be fastidious about the rules in the next Congress. We're going to show you how to do it.
So that's good. That's good. All right. Chair now recognizes, because the committee's about waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement. This is a hearing about
and
policy.
You exemplify it well, Mr. Chairman. I concede that.
So this is a hearing about substantive policy. If you want to defend the policies of the current administration, if you want to talk about Kamala Harris's agenda, her policy positions, please do so, because we're not very clear what they are. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fry from South Carolina.